Let's go. Come on in, let's go to where the pictures show, where the hero wins and the monster grins, and everybody knows that face up in those bright projector lights. Well, you might recognize someone here tonight, some thespian also starring in a movie that you like. Face up in those bright projector lights.
Welcome to a special Halloween edition of Also Starring. I'm Dan,
And I'm Morgan.
and we are doing something a little different this time. For the sake of Halloween and the Halloween spirit, we thought we would do some quick little reviews of some scary movies. And the first one, we're doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Which came out in 1974, directed by Tobe Hooper and starring nobody that anybody knows.
There's no famous people in this movie.
But my roommate was like, "Oh, is there anybody in this who went on to be in other things?" Because I was telling her how dangerous the shoot was, and she was like, "Well, hopefully it was at least worth it." And I was like, "Fuck no, no one knows who any of these people are."
They're lucky if they got college credit for this movie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say Gunnar Hansen, who plays Leatherface, is kind of he's kind of a known person in the horror community, and he's been in some other horror movies and stuff.
If you go to a horror convention or something and he's there, he's going to be somebody people would want to talk to. But other than that, there's nobody. I mean, a lot of people get their starts in horror movies, so that's a fair point. Jamie Lee Curtis, and a million other people. I can't think of their names right now, but they all started in horror. And
yeah, I
think it's because
I don't know if that was a trend that started in the 80s or not, though. I feel like maybe it wasn't the thing in the 70s.
A lot of it's still luck, but I think it's because they're cheaper to produce generally, so more of them get made, so it's kind of a probability thing. And then, if you happen to get one that's relatively decent, then your chances of going somewhere. I think Jamie Lee Curtis's parents were famous too. Wasn't her dad Tony Curtis? So there was some.
Yeah, her mom was in Psycho. She
who and then Psycho was based off of Ed Gein, which is based off of Leatherface, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Leatherface is based off Ed Gein as well.
Was he Ed Gein as well? Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah, I was. That was one of the things that I was actually searching for.
Oh, you didn't catch the similarity with the mother in the rocking chair upstairs? I mean, it was whoa.
Yeah, that's true. No, and I knew the thing about the whole idea behind the Texas Chainsaw being, oh, what if there was a family of Ed Geins? But this time watching it, really the question that was nagging me was why did he make this movie? Where did this come from? Because it seems like such a departure for 1974. Apparently, he had relatives who lived in Wisconsin, not that far away from Ed Gein, and he said that they, as a child, told him stories about, human skin lampshades and furniture and stuff like that. Jeez. And he didn't even know as a kid who Ed Gein was, but he just heard about this stuff and it just stuck with him. Oof. And so that's where this movie came from.
So if the audience doesn't know, Ed Gein was a serial killer that kind of a lot of movies have borrowed from, and he did skin his victims and then make stuff out of their skin. Did he make masks? I don't know if he made masks, but if you've never seen this movie, it's very art house meets horror meets somebody's worst nightmare, right? It's it almost transcends horror a little bit into somebody's worst fears, and they're trying to capture that on film. I just want to kind of set up what this movie's about. It doesn't have a plot. It doesn't really like have characters that you're invested in or anything like that. It's just following a group of 5 people in a van, and they're going to this house because they want to like just go check it out. They run out of gas, and then they see a farmhouse, and then they split up in kind of odd ways, and then all these bad things are happening. But there's no like reason why they're doing anything, and there's no motivation. There's no plot. It's just a series of like seriously gnarly things that happen to these people.
Yeah. It's just a group of teenagers stumble into the wrong house that is owned.
Was this the first movie that did that? That idea of like, you know, the group of kids that are like smoking dope and then they stumble on the wrong thing, and then
I really don't know, but it feels that way to me. And
like
it feels like the archetype. I mean, people always say that, you know, Halloween is the proto slasher movie, but this one, I mean, you could say, of course, Psycho is, but this one feels like it's the first one that I know of that has that kind of like
it's the first one in color
teenage body count idea that would become so popular in movies like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
And it's why he's included in that pantheon of slasher killers, you know.
Yeah, Leatherface is famous for being the chainsaw wielding maniac, and it's exactly that in this movie. There's like nothing
but it's so much before Halloween that it still feels like it's not kind of a part of that tradition. It's weird.
Halloween's more polished as like a film. Like it has a beginning and a story, and like there's like people that are after, and there's like something that's going on. This is like almost like found footage because of the way it starts out too. It has like, you know, a narrator's voice that's like kind of tells you what's going on, and like the first act looks like a student film gone wrong. Like it's super bad. And then as soon as they get to the farmhouse, like then you're like, oh my God, what's happening? So you can see where they put all their effort. Like the actors are they're super bad. They have this guy in a wheelchair, and you're not really sure why he's in a wheelchair. And then he's got this attitude. Yeah, and he's almost like simple, but he's not.
Well, I think the idea is that he's the brother of one of the girls, and he's been in the wheelchair. He's been in the wheelchair his whole life, so he's kind of just always been that guy who's like a nuisance to everybody. That's a terrible thing to say, but that's how they portray him in this movie, is like he's a burden on everybody, and they'd really rather him not be around, but like, what are they gonna do? He's her brother.
I mean, they have the radio playing in this movie, and the radio is just the news, and it's just playing bad news the entire time. Like horrible things are happening all the time. I was like, unbelievable.
There's so much atmosphere in this movie. It's just that, and that's kind of what sells it, because like you said, there are no characters, there is no real plot, but it's just so thick with mood and like just this heavy dread that it's a memorable experience, and it's still watchable even though there's like nobody to really root for or like have much interest in. It's just such an intense experience to watch it.
And since it was the first one, there's not a lot of the cliches that they fall into. You expect them to kind of get away or miss. None of that happens. When they encounter bad people, like bad things happen to them. They don't like there's no clever device for them to like sneak out of a situation or something. I guess until later.
And the other interesting thing to note that, you know, people always talk about is the fact that it's really not that gory. Like there's actually very little blood and next to no gore. I mean, there's implied gore, but you don't actually see anything. But
there's a bit on his person like later on, and then she's pretty covered at the end. But yeah, as far as splatter, it's not splatter. They don't do that.
Or you don't see any sort of like you don't see any like Tom Savini. I mean, this was too early. You don't see any Tom Savini style.
Tom Savini's like the creature effects, like the horror like effects guy,
and the like Friday the 13th gore effects guy. Like what you would
I think his big one was
going through bodies and stuff.
The Dawn of the Dead, I think, was his big thing, right?
Yeah, but he also did the first Friday the 13th, so that sort of set the template for.
I'm talking about like when the zombies are eating the sausages out of the middle of people. That one sticks with me like way more than I can't remember like any of the Friday the 13th like death scenes. They're usually just like slashed or hacked or something. But like seeing like the zombies eat the intestines out of somebody, stuck with me. It's like,
but they were famous for those shots, which, you know, maybe by today's standard aren't a big deal, but at the time it was like, whoa, you know, the kills were an important part of that franchise. And I just mentioned it because this movie doesn't have anything like that, really. I mean, he puts a girl on a meat hook at one point, but like you don't see it go into her back or anything. It's just
they also didn't record the audio of it either, so there's no sound effect for it to happen. It just kind of happens, and you're like, oh, okay.
It's really just her performance that sells it, which, like, you know, we said there's actors are terrible, but at least in moments like that, they do sell the horror and the terror and the pain pretty well. I mean, they're not doing good dialogue, but they're selling those visceral moments pretty well.
How did you feel about the level of screaming in this movie at the end?
I mean, it's wall to wall screaming for like 20 minutes at the end of the movie.
The lady does not stop. Not once. It just keeps going on. Saria called it an assault on my ears.
I was wondering if you were going to watch it with her and how she'd feel.
I debated it because she doesn't really like horror movies, but she was a good sport. And then, you know, halfway through the first act, she's like, this movie is fucking terrible. I mean, it's really bad. Like, it's a really bad movie. If you're not a horror fan... it's a bad movie. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I guess if you're not a fan of this genre at all, then yeah, it's going to be excruciating. But
no, if you don't like horror movies, don't watch this movie because you're going to think like it looks like a low rent horror movie.
I will argue, though, I think that the cinematography in this is brilliant. I think that aside from it feeling like a found footage or documentary footage, like you said, the use of framing and shots, and particularly the lighting's great, and particularly the sense of space. Those shots, like even in the beginning, I do love the van sequences because there's those exterior shots of the van that are really cool where there's like just mostly sky and like a little bit of the horizon.
Yeah, that's like the
and then
the thirds in photography.
The van is like down in the corner, and then once you get inside it, it's this very claustrophobic thing with all these people crammed into the van, and they shot it for real, like while it's driving around, and the windows are just blown out because of that, but it creates this really trippy feeling where it's just like these white window frames, but it feels like hot and it feels claustrophobic.
Some of the sound effects are so iconic, like the sound of the photograph at the beginning, and just like the music is weird and terrible, and then it's also just like so different. They pick up a hitchhiker, and then someone's like, oh, he looks weird, and then they pick him up anyway, and he is weird, and he totally looks weird. And then they just keep letting him be in the car, even though he's like talking nuts. He has this like razor blade in his shoe, and he's freaking crazy, and they don't stop. The guy at the front of the van, who's probably 4 feet away from the whole conversation, is like, I don't hear anything, and he just keeps driving. And then finally it takes him cutting the guy in the wheelchair's arm with his knife
to throw them out,
to be like, oh, now we got to get rid of him. But all of the talk about him, like he had pictures of cow mutilation that he had, and just so how much does Rob Zombie love this movie? Because I feel like I was just watching this and I was like,
so much
his entire inspiration for his entire theatrical career.
This was also a big influence on Ridley Scott when he made Alien. He said he cited this as like a big influence, and it makes sense. It's that whole use of light, use of space, use of like set design to create just like a dreadful mood. Ridley Scott, you know, better with the characters and the actors and all that, and a much bigger budget. But
yeah, I mean, you can see the two. Yeah,
you can see the connection though, I think. at
Yeah.
least in terms of the mood, the atmosphere.
So who was Tobe Hooper's inspiration to make this movie?
Dude, I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
The first time you see Leatherface, like I remember where I was.
Pull any punches.
I remember where I was when I saw that for the first time because it made such a huge impression. And again, it's that sense of space where the guy stumbles towards the doorway and then all of a sudden he moves in the doorway and it's like he's just right there. And the camera kind of pans up at him and he looks like gigantic. And I mean, he is gigantic.
He's got to be like over 7 feet tall. Yeah.
He's a
He looks like
dude.
is the pro wrestler Undertaker? He kind of looks like that.
Kinda.
Yeah.
But I would say also like another plus of this movie, along with all the stuff that I said, like the look of it, the technical stuff. You marry that with his physical performance, which is so like violently erratic and like nervous, and just it's not like any other movie monster that I've ever seen. Like there's something about the way that he moves that's just so unhinged and like
it's good direction. I think there's like parts when you see him run and he kind of does this like overshoot of the running and then he'll like kind of skip and then like keep running the other way. And it's like his momentum has like gone too far one way, right? Dude, he can't stop, and he does it like really well, like multiple times after like while he's chasing. And I think that's pretty good direction. Maybe
this is going too far down the rabbit hole, but if you ever have more time to set aside for this movie, definitely watch it with the commentary with Gunnar Hansen and Tobe Hooper.
Oh, it's nice.
Hilarious. It's one of the best movie commentaries I've ever listened to. Honestly, the stuff that was going on behind the scenes of making this movie is almost as crazy as the movie itself. And the thing with the like you just mentioned, the turns that he makes where he kind of like skids out almost, that's because one of the takes before that he made the turn and his feet went out from under him because he's such a huge dude.
He just made shit.
No, the chainsaw, which was like a live chainsaw, just went up into the air, and he said it just went above the lights, so he couldn't see, and plus he couldn't see that well out of the mask anyway. So he said he just like went into a fetal position and like covered his head, and that's like all he could do.
That's what I would. Well, yeah,
and then the chainsaw landed like right next to him. Yeah. And that's another crazy story. He said that he kept asking Tobe Hooper, so how are we going to do this thing where the chainsaw hits my leg? And Tobe Hooper kept saying, I don't know, but don't worry, it's the last shot of the movie, so like it'll be all right. And he's like, and that put me at ease. But then I realized that he was just saying like, if you die, it's cool because the movie's over. Finished.
See, good direction. That's smart. He's like, I got a budget and a timeline, and I gotta make my movie.
Stop asking me these fucking questions.
Shut up, Gunnar. Get in the set. So when you first see Leatherface, he doesn't make normal human noises. The audio is like a squealing pig, and so you're not like really sure what's happening, and you don't know if he's like a human being because he's wearing a mask of another person, and he's also huge and wearing a huge apron for butchering animals, and it's just like, oh my god, what is this? And the first guy that walks in the house, he opens the door and he sees him, he just pops out of the corner and boom, hits him in the head with a sledgehammer, and he's down, and that's it. There's no chase, nothing. It's just that. And then he proceeds to kill 2 more people, I think, with the sledgehammer to the head, like very quickly.
Yeah, he gets the other boyfriend, Jerry, I think, with the hammer too.
Okay,
the girl,
and then he hooks the girl.
Yeah. I don't think you ever actually see her die.
You don't. She gets shoved into the ice box later on, right?
Yeah. It's so awful. You're right. It is kind of for the horror lovers because it's a little bit hard to justify. Like, there's no kind of redeeming anything. I mean, the final girl does get away at the end, but it's just like only by a hair and by luck, and like he's still standing there dancing with the chainsaw like in the sun. It's an amazing shot, but it's like there's no justice. They're still out there.
Your stomach will hurt still.
Maniacs.
The last scene. When I was younger, I was kind of more into horror movies, and I was watching a lot of documentaries. I remember certain things. Like, I remember them talking about this movie and shooting it in the Texas summer and just being like horribly, horribly hot. And they were like,
yeah,
this is like unbearable. Like, how can we make this movie in here?
yeah.
There's a scene where they have dinner at the end, and the family that's in there is like very, very, very nasty. And then I can't imagine like being in there with like the actress whose job is to basically just scream the entire time, and then it being like hot also. Like, it just must have been kind of nuts.
I mean, so they were doing like to get all that stuff, they did like a 27-hour shoot straight through, and it was like, like the dead of Texas summer heat, and they had to black out the windows with like black felt to make it look like nighttime, even though they're shooting in the daytime. It just sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah,
they're all going crazy. There's a lot of other stories out of that, but I don't want to like get into it. I would say watch that commentary. It's crazy.
I think the jarring nature of like the murdering in it, and like how messed up everybody is, the crazy family, the weird grandpa that's like dead kind of upstairs, and like they cut this girl's finger and then they stick it in his mouth, and you're like, what is happening? Isn't he dead? And he starts moving, and you're like, oh my god, he's alive. Yeah, plus they decorate their entire house with bones of all the kinds of animals and like people bones, and they have this couch. The couch is like the coolest thing. It's like this bone couch. It's so nasty.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed the chair that she's sitting in at the end has like hands on the armrest. Yeah. So it's like her hands, but then it's somebody else's hands underneath.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like really cool details, and they obviously it was like a passion project for sure. Like, they put a lot of effort into trying to make as gnarly as they could. And then you mentioned the chainsaw ballet at the end, which is how they end the movie, which is super awesome. But hold on, I'm being summoned. Oh, Suri was giving me your opinion of this movie. It was thumbs down.
Oh, I want to know. I was going to ask you, what do you think was her least favorite moment of the movie? What was the point where she was like, "Oh my god, this is
so"? She didn't like the first part because she was like, "What are these people doing, and why are they picking up hitchhikers? What are they doing?" And then when they got to the house, she was just like, it just got worse and worse. I think my note here is Surya hates this movie. Ha ha! Exclamation point. Yeah. Oh, I think where she really gets mad when things don't make a lot of sense, when the girl runs and gets away from Leatherface for the first time and runs to the gas station, finds the old man who she doesn't know is Leatherface's dad, and then trusts him, and she's sitting in his like confines or whatever in his gas station, and then she finally realizes that he's like out to get her. She picks up a knife and he disarms her with a broom, and she's like, broom, you can't disarm someone that's fleeing for their life with a broom." And then I think that's where it just went off the rails for her.
Yeah, I think that's a moment that loses a lot of people. That's fair.
I didn't remember that. Fair. I was just kind of like, I could see that. It's long. She's like panicking, whatever. But she was like, no, that's
you'd have to hit someone pretty hard with a broom in order to.
I mean, and it's like the broom side too, so it's kind of just like a little,
just a little thwack.
Yeah.
So that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I saw it when I was really young for the first time, when I was trying to like, explore horror movies on my own rather than just watching like whatever my brother told me to watch, and it made an impression on me then. I saw it again in college, and I was like kind of blown away by the just filmmaking aspect of it. And then watching it again now, it's like, yeah, this is a classic for a reason. Even though, like you said, it is, the characters suck, the actors suck, like it's got something undeniable, just intense.
The first act is hard to get through if you're expecting to be like a build up to why they're doing things, because there's not really that. But once they get to the horror parts, like, it's expertly done. It's like super good. Yeah, it's very, very like, oh my god. Like,
I mean,
almost the first time 50 years later, it's like still like, Jesus. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Thanks for watching, and check out our next video, which will be on Poltergeist, also directed by Tobe Hooper.
Or so they say.
Or so they say. I am Dan.
And I'm Morgan.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Face up in